So, uh, I actually had a really weird moment this morning.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I was um I was just staring at the back of my phone case. I'm not going to mention the brand, but you know the one.
Right. The very famous fruit-related one.
Exactly. And I was reading that tiny laser etched text at the bottom, the part that says designed in California, assembled in China.
It's practically a haiku for the modern world, isn't it?
It really is. But it stopped me for a second because it implies this massive geographical divorce. Like the brain of the phone is in one hemisphere and the body is in another.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, I realize I have zero idea how we actually got here. Like, why don't we just make the whole thing in one place anymore? Is it literally just about cheap labor, or is there, something bigger going on?
That is the perfect question to kick us off. You've basically just pinpointed the heart of our deep dive today.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, we are technically looking at AP Human Geography Topic 7.7, but really, we're decoding the invisible operating system of the global economy.
The invisible operating system. I like that.
It fits, right?
Okay.
And we're basing this whole discussion on a text called The Global Shift, Post-Fordist Restructuring and Economic Integration.
Which, I have to be honest, sounds like the title of a book I would use to prop up a wobbly table.
It's a mouthful, for sure.
It sounds incredibly dense.
It is dense, but hidden in all that academic language is a really gripping story. I mean, it's the story of how your phone, your clothes, your car, how they all ended up scattered across the globe.
Right.
We're talking about a fundamental shift in how the human race organizes space and work. A massive move from Fordism, which was the old way, to post-Fordism, which is this chaotic high-speed web we all live in right now.
Okay, so the mission for today is to figure out why the factories left the U.S. and Europe, how places like China became the world's workshop, and my personal favorite term from the reading, what on earth a technopole is.
We will definitely get to the technopoles.
Yeah.
But to understand the now, we really have to understand the then. The text starts by looking at Fordism.
Okay, so Fordism. I'm assuming we're talking about Henry Ford, the Model T.
We are, but it's much more than just a car company. Fordism was this total economic philosophy that basically ruled the mid-20th century.
Okay.
Imagine a giant factory in Detroit, or maybe Manchester, in the 1950s. Raw materials go in one end, and finished products come out the other.
Right.
It was massive, it was centralized, and everything was completely standardized.
Right, like that famous line, you can have any color you want as long as it's black.
Exactly. It was all about the mass production of standardized goods. But here is the key insight the source text really highlights, which I think often gets missed.
What's that?
Fordism wasn't just a manufacturing technique, it was a social contract. Ford didn't just streamline the assembly line, he famously doubled his workers' wages.
Oh, I remember hearing about that, but that wasn't just out of the kindness of his heart, right?
Not at all. It was highly calculated.
Yeah.
He realized that if you're going to mass produce millions of cars, you need a mass market to actually buy them.
Right.
By paying his workers really well, he essentially turned his own employees into his target demographic.
That's the magic loop. The worker makes the car, gets paid a decent wage, and then goes out and buys the car.
And that cycle created the massive middle class in what geographers call the core countries. So the United States, Western Europe, this was the golden age of the factory town.
Yeah, you had stability, you had labor unions, you basically had a job for life.
Precisely.
It sounds almost idyllic in a, gritty industrial kind of way. So why did we blow it up? The text points to the 1970s as the moment the wheels fell off. What exactly happened?
Well, economists call it the crisis of profitability. Basically, that idyllic stability you mentioned became very expensive. Unions got strong, workers rightly demanded better safety, higher pay, better health benefits.
Okay, so labor costs are going up.
Exactly. And at the exact same time, the market for those standardized goods just got completely saturated. Everyone who wanted a black Model T or a standard washing machine already had one.
So the big corporations are looking at their spreadsheets, they're seeing shrinking profit margins, and they start looking for an exit strategy.
And that exit strategy was deindustrialization. Corporate investment just shifted completely away from domestic factories. They realized, hey, we don't need to actually make things here anymore.
And this gives us that really haunting imagery from the text, the Rust Belt.
Yeah, it's such a visceral term. It describes the physical scars left behind by this economic shift. When all that capital flies away, it literally leaves behind rusted metal and hollowed out communities.
Places like Ohio, Michigan, or Northern England.
Exactly.
It's tragic, really. It's not just empty brick buildings. It's a whole way of life that just evaporated for millions of people. But the factories didn't just vanish into thin air. They went somewhere.
They did.
And this brings us to the new model. The text calls it post-Fordist production.
Right, and this is the world you and I live in right now. If Fordism was all about mass production under one giant roof, post-Fordism is defined by two main things: flexibility and dispersal.
Okay, let's break those down. Flexibility and dispersal. What does flexibility look like here?
Flexibility means you aren't making a million identical black cars anymore. You're making smaller batches, highly customized for niche markets. The consumer market is super fragmented now.
Got it. And dispersal?
Dispersal is the global assembly line.
Kind of like the Lego set approach to manufacturing.
That is a brilliant way to put it. Instead of one factory making the whole product from start to finish, you break the product down into tiny components.
Right.
So maybe the microchip is made in Taiwan, the glass screen is manufactured in South Korea, the battery comes from Vietnam, and it all gets shipped to China for final assembly.
But hold on a second. How is that actually cost-effective? Shipping parts across oceans multiple times seems like an absolute logistical nightmare. Wouldn't the shipping cost just totally eat up whatever you save on labor?
It absolutely would have maybe 50 years ago. But two major things changed the game. First, the standard shipping container. It made moving goods across oceans insanely cheap and efficient.
All right, because they all stack perfectly on those massive cargo ships.
Exactly. And the second thing was the internet. You cannot coordinate a complex global web of parts if you can't talk to the factory halfway around the world in real time.
So advanced transportation and communication tech basically shrank the world.
It did. It allowed these massive companies to pursue what the text calls the International Division of Labor.
Okay, yes, this was a massive concept in the reading, the division of labor. It almost seems like the world just decided to split up the chores. So who does what now?
Think of it as a global separation of the head and the hands.
The brain and the brawn.
Essentially, yes. The core countries, the ones that used to be the manufacturing powerhouses like the US, the UK, Japan, they shifted heavily into the service and knowledge economies.
Okay.
The text breaks these down into specific sectors. You have the tertiary, quaternary, and quinary sectors.
Well, okay, slow down there. I know tertiary means services like waiters, teachers, nurses, retail, but quaternary and quinary, those sound like sci-fi dimensions.
They do sound a bit alien. Quaternary is the information and research sector. Think IT, data processing, high-level consultancy.
Okay, so knowledge work.
Right. And then the quaternary sector is the absolute highest level of decision-making. CEOs, top government officials, the top brass of multinational corporations.
So all that big brain strategy work stays safely in the core countries.
Exactly. The core keeps the design, the branding, the patents, the financial control, the really high-value stuff.
Which leaves the brawn, who took over the heavy lifting.
That would be the NICs, the newly industrialized countries, places like China, Mexico, India, Vietnam. They largely took over the secondary sector, which is the actual manufacturing.
And the text mentions that this shift triggered the largest internal migration in human history.
Yes, and that is not an exaggeration. In China alone, hundreds of millions of people migrated from rural agricultural regions to the coastal cities just to staff these new mega factories.
Wow.
It literally reshaped the human geography of the entire planet almost overnight.
That is wild to think about. Like, we see a Made in China sticker on a toy, but we don't visualize the millions of individuals who packed up their lives and moved hundreds of miles just to make that sticker possible.
It connects the local individual to the global system in a very tangible, physical way.
So, okay, we know why companies want to move. They're chasing cheaper labor and maximizing profit. But I've always wondered, how do these developing countries actually compete with each other?
What do you mean?
Like, if I'm Apple or Nike, why do I pick a port city in Vietnam over a port city in Bangladesh? The world is a very big place. How do they lure them in?
Now we get into the secret sauce of globalization. It's not just about offering low wages. It's about this alphabet soup of special zones.
Yes, I saw this in the notes. SEZ, EPZ, FTZ. It feels like a high school vocabulary quiz, but the text makes it sound like these are almost like cheat codes for corporations.
They are essentially legal islands. A developing country will draw a line on a map, usually around a major port or an international airport, and say, inside this fence, the normal economic rules of our country do not apply.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
Like the laws are literally suspended?
The business and trade laws, yes. These are called Special Economic Zones, or SEZs. The government offers massive tax breaks, deregulations, and incentives to foreign companies to get them to set up shop right there.
So it's basically a bribe. Come build your massive shoe factory here, and we promise you don't have to pay corporate taxes for the next 10 years.
Effectively, yes. It's a way for a country to attract foreign investment without having to drastically change the laws for their entire domestic economy.
That's clever.
It is, but it goes deeper. Within the broader SEZ family, you have something called an EPZ, an export processing zone.
EPZ. Okay, how is that different from a regular SEZ?
The key distinction is right there in the name export processing. These specific zones are focused exclusively on manufacturing goods for export.
Okay, so they aren't making stuff for the local population to buy.
Not at all. They are making stuff to put directly onto a container ship and send away to the core countries.
And why would a massive corporation want to set up an EPZ specifically?
Because the incentives are very aggressive. Lower taxes, of course. But crucially, and the SourceX is very explicit about highlighting this, they often feature significantly less strict labor laws.
Oof. So the pitch is, come here and we promise we won't let the workers form a labor union.
Or, we won't enforce the national minimum wage quite as strictly in this zone. Or environmental regulations might be conveniently overlooked.
Wow.
The text notes that these zones allow corporations to avoid the quote-unquote pesky regulations that cut into their profit margins back home.
That is, well, it's a really harsh reality.
Yeah.
It's basically a government saying to a corporation, come exploit our labor force, just please do it inside this designated box.
That is certainly the critical perspective, and it's a valid one. The text is careful to present it as a trade-off. The developing country lowers its standards in this one specific geographic area, but in exchange, they get thousands of jobs, foreign currency, and new infrastructure.
Right, but the quality of those jobs is definitely up for debate. It really feels like the dark underbelly of how we get that $5 t-shirt.
It is a highly complex dynamic.
And then there's one more acronym to tackle. The FTZ, the Free Trade Zone. How is that one distinct?
Think of an FTZ as a massive waiting room for goods. It's usually a designated area near a port or border where goods can be landed, stored, handled, and then re-exported without ever dealing with the host country's customs authorities.
So you don't pay any tariffs?
Not while the product is physically inside the zone.
Yeah.
So a company can bring in raw parts from 3 different countries, assemble them into a final product inside the FTZ, and ship the finished product out, all without technically entering the country for tax purposes.
That's wild. It just eliminates the friction of borders completely.
Exactly. It's the oil that keeps the global supply chain machine running smoothly. Capital flows like water. It just goes wherever the resistance is lowest.
So we've talked a lot about the where, the Rust Belt, the NICs, the special zones. Now I really want to talk about the how. How does this actually grow an economy? Because the text makes a big point that when a factory opens, it's not just about those specific assembly line jobs.
Right. This brings us to a really important economic concept called the multiplier effect.
The multiplier effect. It sounds like a power-up in a video game.
In a way, it is a power-up for a local economy. The core idea is that one single factory job doesn't just employ that one person.
Okay.
That factory worker gets a paycheck, they need to buy groceries, they need to get a haircut, their house needs electricity.
Oh, I see. So the factory hires a worker, but the sheer presence of that factory creates a secondary job for a local janitor, an electrician, a grocery store clerk.
Exactly. It creates jobs in support services and community services for the workers. The money ripples outwards. That is how a single manufacturing plant can revitalize or even entirely build a whole town.
That makes a lot of sense. But you also have this other term in the reading, agglomeration, which I have to say sounds like a stomach condition. Like, I can't come into work today, I have a bad case of agglomeration.
It does sound a bit medicinal, but agglomeration is just a fancy geographic term for clustering. It's what happens when competitors or related businesses all cluster together in one very specific area.
Which seems super counterintuitive to me. If I open a pizza shop, I definitely do not want to be right next door to 3 other pizza shops. I want to be the only game in town.
In local retail, sure, you want a monopoly on the neighborhood, but in manufacturing and high-tech industries, clustering actually makes perfect sense. By agglomerating, all these companies can share resources. They share specialized infrastructure like high-speed data lines or specific shipping routes. But the absolute most important factor is what economists call knowledge spillover, or sometimes just a specialized labor pool.
Knowledge spillover. How does that work in practice?
Imagine you're a highly specialized software engineer. If you move to a tiny town in the Midwest for a job, You might be the only coder in 100 miles. If that startup fails and you lose your job, you have to pack up and move across the country.
Right, your options are zero.
But if you move to Silicon Valley, there are thousands of jobs in your exact niche.
And for the big tech companies, the talent pool is just sitting right there in their backyard.
Exactly. And the ideas themselves travel. People from rival companies meet at coffee shops, they talk at bars, they switch jobs every few years. The expertise is literally in the air. That is why tech companies will happily pay insane commercial rents to be in San Francisco or Seattle instead of building a cheap campus in the middle of nowhere.
And that perfectly brings us back to the Technopole.
Yes, the Technopole. This is a very specific type of agglomeration. It's a growth pole that is entirely focused on high-tech industries. Silicon Valley is the classic example, or the Research Triangle in North Carolina.
The text had a really funny way of describing the work that actually happens in these technopoles. He called it the thinky work.
I loved that phrasing too, the thinky work. It's the design, the software engineering, the research and development. Just like we mentioned at the very beginning, the physical glass and metal of the iPhone is made in the periphery, in the factories. But the idea of the iPhone, the operating system, the marketing campaign, that all happens in the Technopole.
And let me guess, that's where all the money is.
The vast majority of it, yes. The designed in California part of your phone case captures most of the actual profit. The assembled in China part captures only a tiny fraction.
So the stark geography of global inequality is basically built right into the product itself?
Precisely. The system separates the high-value knowledge work from the low-value physical labor and places them in completely different hemispheres.
It's just staggering when you really map it out. Okay, before we wrap up this deep dive, there's one last piece of the puzzle. We've talked a lot about where things are made, but the text also spends time talking about when things are made. It mentions a major shift in the timeline of production.
Yes. This is the massive shift away from the old way of holding inventory to what we call just-in-time delivery.
Okay, paint the picture for me. How did the inventory system used to work?
Back in the Fornes days, companies relied on economies of scale. You produced massive quantities of goods all at once because it's mathematically cheaper per unit to make 10,000 washing machines than 100.
Sure, volume discount.
But then you had to actually store them. So you had these giant cavernous warehouses full of unsold stuff just sitting there for months waiting for a buyer.
Which is basically millions of dollars just sitting on a shelf gathering dust.
Exactly. It's incredibly inefficient. Just-in-time delivery flips that entire model upside down. Now, you manufacture smaller batches specifically in response to actual demand.
So you don't even make the product until someone, or I guess some predictive algorithm, says it's absolutely needed right now.
Right. It reduces storage costs to near zero, which massively increases corporate profits.
Now, this sounds great for the corporate balance sheet. No storage costs, no wasted products. But I feel like I actually experienced the downside of this very recently as a consumer. I bought a new couch.
Let me guess. You did not take it home that day.
No. I paid for it, and the guy at the store casually told me it would be delivered in 8 weeks. I looked at him like, "Are you currently growing the trees for the wood?" But he explained that they don't actually build the couch until the specific order comes through the system.
That is the just-in-time model perfectly in action. As consumers, we are trading immediate availability for supply chain efficiency and product customization. When the global supply chain works perfectly, it's brilliant. But when it hiccups, like during a pandemic or a port strike, or when demand surges unexpectedly, you end up waiting 8 weeks for a couch.
It really changes how we think about buying things. I mean, we used to think of a retail store as a place where things physically are. Now the store is really just a user interface for the global factory.
That is a very poetic way to put it, and highly accurate. But there is also a much darker side to the just-in-time model, specifically for the worker.
Oh, how so?
Think about it. If you have a just-in-time production system, logically, you need a just-in-time workforce.
Oh, I see exactly where this is going.
If consumer demand drops for a week, the factory manager doesn't want to pay hundreds of workers to just stand around an empty assembly line. So companies shift away from those stable Fordist jobs for life that we talked about earlier.
Right.
They replace them with temporary contracts, part-time work, gig work. The labor force has to become just as flexible as the manufacturing process.
So the fundamental risk is just being shifted downward. In the old days, the massive company took the financial risk of holding inventory in a warehouse. Now, the individual worker takes the risk of simply not getting a paycheck if demand drops.
Precisely. We have engineered a system optimized purely for corporate efficiency. But the ultimate cost is very often the financial stability of the workforce itself.
Man, that is heavy. When you put all these pieces together, the outsourcing, the special economic zones, bypassing labor laws, the just-in-time temporary contracts, it really feels as we've built a global machine that is incredibly ruthlessly efficient at making things, but maybe not so great at taking care of the actual people making them.
That is arguably the central tension of the entire modern world economy. We have access to cheaper goods than ever before in human history. You can literally buy a newly manufactured t-shirt for $5. We have incredible, life-changing technology. But this whole system relies entirely on a very stark international division of labor and highly flexible, which, as we said, often means unstable work.
So let's step back and look at the whole picture we've painted today. We've gone from the rust of the old centralized factories to this high-speed, highly dispersed network we rely on today.
It is a total restructuring of the planet. If we synthesize the main points from the text, the core countries have successfully transitioned into the hubs of ideas and services. The periphery and the newly industrialized countries have become the hubs of physical manufacturing. And the invisible glue holding this entire massive operation together is advanced technology and the legal loopholes of special economic zones.
And for you listening, this isn't just some abstract geography lesson. Every single time you buy something, you are pulling a thread in this massive global web. Your phone, your clothes, your car, they've all traveled through this incredibly complex maze of SEZs, FTZs, and global shipping lanes before they ever got to your front door.
And always remember that divide between the thinky work and the manual labor. The financial value is added at very different steps in the process, and that geography directly determines who gets rich and who just barely gets by.
It really makes you think about the ultimate trade-offs we're making. We've shaved every possible penny off the cost of production. But as we watch supply chains occasionally collapse and global political tensions rise, and we feel the collective anxiety of the modern gig economy, you have to wonder, have we optimized ourselves into a corner? Like, are we trading away our societal stability and resilience just to get that couch a little bit cheaper?
It raises a profound question that the text hints at but leaves open. In a world where physical production is scattered absolutely everywhere, where does the real power actually lie? Is it with the country that physically manufactures the parts, or is it with the country that designs the blueprint?
Now, that is the question that will probably define the next 50 years of geopolitics.
Hmm?
A huge thank you to everyone for tuning in to this deep dive. We really hope you'll never look at a simple product label the same way again.
Indeed. Keep questioning the map.
Catch you on the next deep dive.